everyone and welcome back to the channel, and in today's episode what I was going to do was I was going to go over any kind of information that we got from the Square Enix Presents showcase, but there was literally nothing in there. Nothing Final Fantasy related anyway. The only slightly interesting thing for me was the fact that Project Athia got a title. It's now called Forspoken, which it's a bit of a weird one, but it all kind of depends what the storyline for that game is. It could tie in really nicely. I am looking forward to getting more on it, but we'll just have to wait and see. And in fairness, any kind of future Final Fantasy Remake information we're probably going to get on Saturday. On Saturday, there's like a PlayStation, I want to say a showcase, but it supposedly is some sort of like a chat show type thing. And they've already said that there's going to be Resident Evil 8 news there and Final Fantasy VII Remake news there. So yeah, that's where we're going to get the remake information. So what I'm going to do instead, there was another interview from Tetsuya Nomura in Famitsu covering Ever Crisis, Final Fantasy VII Intergrade, the Yuffie DLC, and the First Soldier. That's been translated again by the wonderful Audrey over on Twitter, so if you don't follow her, seriously, what are you doing with your life? Get over there and follow her. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly go over that translation and just see if there's any kind of information that we can get regarding the future of Final Fantasy and Final Fantasy VII Remake. Don't forget to drop a like on the video and subscribe for future content. It massively helps out the channel and helps me grow. But let's get straight into it. So the first thing that we'll start off with is Final Fantasy VII Intergrade. The first question is just kind of asking about the character Sonon, and can you give us a bit more about his concept and his design and things like that. And Nomura kind of lets us know that originally he is from Wutai and he works with Avalanche, so that would explain why he's so connected to this kind of mission regarding Yuffie, and it could also explain why he's calling Yuffie boss as well. I mean, it's probably to do with Wutai having hired Avalanche, but if he's from Wutai, he knows who Yuffie is, who her father is, so that might be another part of it. They wanted a character that had balance with Yuffie and be a staff wielder as well. His clothes also allow him to move freely. In the beginning, we originally planned for him to be a lithe and extremely attractive man, however we ended up making him more manly, since Yuffie is different than what she's like with Cloud or Vincent, so we thought it would be interesting to see how she interacts with him. Right, okay. So yeah, that's where some of the concepts for his design came from and why he looks like he does, I suppose. The next question is talking about Yuffie and Sonon being able to do co-op moves together and wanting to explore a bit more of the battle concept. First off, can you explain what these small icons mean next to the ATB gauge? Nomura says, since the player can only control Yuffie, you'll still get a feel of where Sonon is nearby as well as his movements. There's also a mode where Sonon can act on his own, or another mode where he fights given specific orders by Yuffie. So it seems like you can automate Sonon entirely and just concentrate on controlling Yuffie. I'm pretty certain I'm going to prefer being able to give direct commands to Sonon, so that'll probably be the route I go. He says that you can switch between these two modes with the L2 button, and that's what the icon next to the ATB gauge is. So it's not so much an indicator of when Sonon's ready to do a paired attack with Yuffie. I saw a few people speculating that that's what it was going to be, but it seems like it's actually to indicate what mode he's in, so whether or not he's in this automatic mode or whether or not he's, under player control as much as he can be, because again, you can only control him by giving him commands via the ATB menu. You can't actually control him and run around in combat. The interviewer then asks if there's going to be new materia and monsters, and Nomura confirms that yes, there will be new materia and monsters that are only available in Yuffie's DLC. And this could be an indicator that we are going to get to see a little bit of outside Midgar. And this is why, or at least part of the reason why I believe that this is only going to be PS5. Like I say, I have already done a video on why I believe that it is PS5 only and why Remake Part 2 is going to be PS5 only. And one of the things in that video that I said it could be is due to the detail of the open world. And like I say, I don't think it's going to be an open world. I don't think it's going to be like the older games in the franchise, but I do feel like it's going to be interconnecting areas, with big open areas between each main stop off in the story. So we could get to see one of those interconnecting areas outside of Midgar. That's always a possibility. And with him saying that there's going to be new monsters and things like that, it is possible that we would see them in an outside area. I'm not 100% on that. That's like a massive degree of speculation. Like, it is very unlikely that we will get to see outside of Midgar, but it's possible. And then probably the best bit of news out of this section of the interview for me, the interviewer asks are there any plans for any further DLC after the Yuffie DLC. And Nomura says, for the sake of separating the PS5 upgrade with Yuffie's additional parts, they had to call this a DLC. However, they'd already decided to create a PS5 version for FF7 Remake. They didn't want it to mean that they're specifically creating DLC as well, and as a result, they've got no plans for any other DLC. He also goes on to say that with Integrate that they're able to adjust to the PS5 environment, which makes for an easy transition to development for the next installment, and the roadwork that they've laid out to complete the entire story takes priority. And if we are ever to add DLC, it will not be until everything has been done. So that tells me we are not going to get another DLC in the entirety of Final Fantasy VII Remake. Leave it in the comments below if you took something differently from that, but that seems to be what he's saying, that there are no more DLC plans, and the only reason this one exists is to almost as like a practice run for the PS5, sort of, to some sort of way to get used to developing for the PS5, iron out any kinks so that when they go into Remake Part 2, which they are obviously already working on, but, before they release that, they've already had this chance to test developing for the PS5 using the Yuffie DLC. So Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2 won't have as many problems as if they hadn't done this Yuffie DLC and hadn't tested the waters, so to speak. And that's the end of the Yuffie DLC and the Final Fantasy VII Remake Integrate information. Next we'll go on to what he says about the First Soldier. So the interviewer comes out and says that it is surprising that the Final Fantasy series is going to include a Battle Royale type game with Final Fantasy VII The First Soldier. Fans of FF7 are of course intrigued, but this also appeals to other types of gamers as well. There are many similar games out there, such as PUBG, Fortnite, Apex Legends, etc, etc, etc. So who exactly is this work targeting? And Nomura basically confirms that they are looking to break into this new market. They wanted to tackle the challenge of appealing to people outside of the Final Fantasy market, and while they feel that Final Fantasy VII's name will overshadow this always, they know that they're entering this popular genre as a new challenger. So yeah, they're trying to use Final Fantasy VII to appeal to a new audience and to add a bit of weight and popularity to this new project that they want to do. They've obviously seen how much money there is in Battle Royale games, how much popularity there is in Battle Royale games, and they've thought, right, what's the biggest name that we can put behind a Battle Royale game? And in the entire Square Enix catalogue, it is without a doubt Final Fantasy VII. So they've done it. It's pretty obvious. He also goes on to talk about job systems with the icons in the top left-hand corner, the interviewer asks about them, and he says that while in FF7 you can't change jobs, it is something that exists in other Final Fantasy games. And I want to jump in now and say this is not going to be similar to the jobs in previous Final Fantasy games. I know most people will already know that. I just feel like I need to throw it out there. It's going to be more based on like your classes from Destiny and things like that. That's what it looks like. And yeah, there's similar concepts, and they'll probably have the same names as other Final Fantasy classes, job classes from the past. But I wouldn't expect an experience like with the jobs in other Final Fantasy games. It's very much going to be a pared down, restricted version of that. Nomura also then confirms that they are looking at a closed beta test, with details being announced later. I would expect this to come soon, the information about this at the very least, because it seems like the First Soldier's going to be out within the next few months, so I don't think we'll be waiting that long for the beta. And it'd be interesting to see how you go about applying for that. Because even though I'm not interested, I'm definitely going to give it a go. Do you know what I mean? Just primarily for the channel, just so that I can get some content done regarding it. But, you got to be fair, got to give it a chance. It could be good. It probably won't be, but it could be. And then the interviewer just asked if there was anything that Nomura was particular about in regards to FF7 The First Soldier. So what kind of things what influence did he have on the game? And he said that most of his concerns centre around gameplay, which is interesting considering it's a completely different type of game to anything that Final Fantasy VII's ever been before, so why do it if you're concerned about the gameplay? But he does go on to say that the producer of the game, Ichikawa, is a hardcore Battle Royale gamer, and, he's definitely keen on making this the best it can be. Nomura's giving him some feedback and things like that, so they don't really give us that much of an answer on this front. It is just going to be a pretty standard Battle Royale game with a couple of little extra things tacked on, which is basically all of these different Battle Royale games do anyway. They've took the core concept and they just kind of slap an extra thing on their own spin on it. So again, it could be good. It probably won't be. Well, if you're a fan of Battle Royale games, it'd probably be really fun for you. I'm not that much of a fan of them, so for me, there's very little interest here. And then the final part of the interview, which we're going to get onto now, is talking about Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis. So first off, the interviewer gets straight in there and asks, will the chapters be free and include the story too? And also, what are the in-game transactions? So if you don't know this, there was an FAQ that went live on I believe it was the Square Enix website regarding Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis. And on there, you can blatantly see that there are gacha mechanics on there. It says in-game, in-app purchases, free to play, basically fitting the model of a gacha game. You can see the video that I've done on it if you just click on the link at the top now. Basically, Nomura comes out and confirms what I was thinking. Each chapter is going to be free to play, and the in-game transactions refer to weapon gacha. You'll also be able to get special weapons or new costumes that don't exist in the original game, and this will add to the experience. No, this will add to Square Enix's bank balance. Let's not. So yeah, I was bang on with that even before the website went up. You could just tell it was going to be a gacha game. It was obvious it was going to be loaded with gacha mechanics. How insipid they are with these gacha mechanics remains to be seen, but yeah, watch this space. The interviewer then asks about the length of each chapter and how long the original FF7 story will be, for example, in this game's format. Nomura says that it's going to be about 10 chapters, and about 3 of those chapters are going to be the escape from Midgar. The other compilation titles will probably follow the same sort of chapter pacing. And this kind of leans into what I was believing originally about this, that it's going to be a very scaled back version of these original stories. It's going to be brilliant to get to experience before Crisis's story. It's going to be fun to play the Advent Children sections, but how much actual playing you do and how much of it is just watching things pan out in a scaled back, abridged format remains to be seen. But the more information that comes out, the more it's starting to look like a very abridged, very short form version of these games, loaded down with microtransactions. So, yeah. The interviewer then asks about original episodes, and we know that there will be. First off, there's going to be the story that takes place in First Soldier, which Nomura confirms here. The story for the First Soldier takes place about 30 years prior to Final Fantasy VII, when Soldier was kind of still in its infancy, and as such, the younger versions of a certain hero, as well as Shinra employees and either other characters who appear in the main story and in the next installments of Remake, they're going to be present as well. So it will give you a deeper understanding of characters who were not talked about much in the main game. Let me read that again. Other characters who will appear in the next installment of Final Fantasy VII Remake will be present as well. In the same breath as talking about young Sephiroth, basically. Which, I'm pretty sure that this would be set too far back for Sephiroth to be anything other than a baby. This is, yeah... I've got a bad feeling that we're going to get Genesis and Angeal in the next part, or at least one of them, or something related to it. There's going to be a lot of Crisis Core stuff that comes into Remake Part 2. I've just got a weird feeling about that. And this little sentence here kind of hints to me that that is correct. It will give you a deeper understanding of characters who were not talked about that much in the main story, which I'm looking forward to, definitely. But it remains to be seen how integral and how important these interactions and these bits of story are. We'll wait and see, obviously. Now, the next question refers to the trailer for Ever Crisis, where we see Aerith involved in the fight against the boss Scorpion, which is obviously not the way it happens. We've not met Aerith at that point. Nomura goes on to explain that, aside from the story mode with the Journey of Cloud and the others, we've also prepared special dungeons and battles that take place outside of the compilation. You can create your own dream party and have fun challenging strong enemies, so sort of like a battle arena side battles thing where you can use any of your characters. That's fair enough. I was a bit concerned that you were going to be able to just... because there's other games that follow very similar mechanics to this, and you can just use whatever characters you want in your party as far as combat goes at any time. And I thought that this was going to be similar to that. From what Nomura is saying there, it isn't. But again, we'll wait and see how that actually comes to pass. Nomura then confirms that they're going to be rearranging the music using the original Final Fantasy VII as the base, which is perfect. Next up, we get that question again, where the interviewer asked Nomura if there was anything that he was particular about in the design and the development of Ever Crisis. Nomura goes on to say that he was rather particular about having all the games fit the style of the original FF7. The rule wasn't present in any other compilation title, and the battle systems are all different. For this game, we're making sure that all of the compilation titles follow this type of format, while also preserving the essence of each game. It's vital to have an interesting battle system, so I was very strict with my views on this, and yeah, from what I've seen of the battle system on Ever Crisis, it looks pretty basic. Like, nothing in comparison to Final Fantasy VII's battle system, so we'll see. He then goes on to say that while we have heard from many that they want to play each compilation title on a console instead of on a phone, Ever Crisis will not be a substitute for that. Instead, Ever Crisis is a game designed so that anyone can pick it up and enjoy the various titles of FF7 freely. So they have heard the people saying, no, I'd play it if it was on console, but I'm not going to play it on mobile, and they're not really bothered, it would seem. Unless that last sentence where he says Ever Crisis is not going to be a substitute for that. That could be indicating that we are going to get the compilation sort of remade, potentially. I don't know. It suggests it a little bit, but it also is nothing and could easily just be ignored. So, I don't know. Some of the terminology, it's interesting. And then finally, they wrap up the interview by talking about FF7 Remake being free on PS Plus. Nomura has said that they're going to be busy with the Final Fantasy VII series, not just this year, but next year and the year after that. So each year is going to be intense. In regards to the Final Fantasy VII series, consider the current news as the first wave. We hope you look forward to more. First off is Intergrade, which comes out in June. We'll also lift the ban on certain streaming restrictions greatly, which also applies to FF7 Remake Intergrade as well. I enjoy watching live streams, so I hope that you take this opportunity to share the experience with as many people as possible. So, just kind of standard stuff there, really. Kind of try to push things forwards as far as the future goes. All in all, that interview, there were a couple of interesting things that came out of it. The first one was the fact that we're not going to be getting any more DLC for Final Fantasy VII Remake until it's completed. From what Nomura said there, I hope that's true. I didn't want to see any DLC for Final Fantasy VII Remake. The Yuffie DLC does make sense because of what it is, and now that I've read what Nomura said about it being kind of like a bridge between PS4 and PS5 and letting them kind of get a bit of practice in, that makes complete sense. It's logical that they've done that. It also tells me that they're planning on getting the whole thing out on PS5. So it tells me that they don't want this to drag on this project into the next console generation. Because he would have indicated that when we jump to PS6, we'll probably do the same sort of thing. Do you know what I mean? There was no indication of that. It was, yeah, we needed to do it this time, but that's it. There's no more DLC. So, yeah, I'm actually really happy about that. I just hope that they up the quality of the side quests and things like that in Remake 2, because that was one of the things that was massively lacking in Remake for me. They had an opportunity to explore Midgar in its fullest, and they missed that opportunity so much. There were so many more quests that could have been put into that game. Little side quests, little bits of character building, things like that, and they just missed the boat completely. So the fact that all the focus is going into the games and not on DLC and things like that, it does give me a shred of hope. And then the other thing was the indication as to how long each chapter is going to be in Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis. Like I say, it just confirms to me the fact that Final Fantasy VII is going to be done in 10 chapters. It's going to be a much more abridged version of the original story. And we also have the possibility that we'll get some sort of compilation remaster on consoles, but I'd say that's pretty unlikely. I think that'll kind of depend on how well Remake does. If Remake as an overall project does crazy numbers, they probably will do it then, because it'll be justified. There'll be enough interest in Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy VII Remake and the compilation and things like that. It would be justifiable. And plus, given the story of Remake and given the fact that, and I don't care what anyone says, it is a sequel, given the fact it's continuing on the compilation, a lot of people won't have experienced the rest of the compilation. So it does make sense for them to bring it forwards. I don't know, though. I think Ever Crisis is going to be all we get. I can't see it. Not at the minute, at least. Things could change. But anyway, what do you think about this interview? Do you think that we're going to see any DLC at any point, or do you think Nomura has just literally flat out confirmed DLC is done? I think he has. I think that's it. But what about you? Don't forget to leave your thoughts in the comments below. Drop a like on the video and subscribe for future content. But more importantly than anything, have a great day.